You ever sit across from someone you thought you knew better than anyone, and suddenly realize you have no idea who's actually sitting there? That was me. I think I need some space, Patricia said, slowly. Like she was picking the words off a menu. I didn't respond. I couldn't. She kept going. I want time to think, James. Time to figure out what I really want. I don't want a divorce, I'm not saying that. I just think I need to explore things. Explore me. Maybe even talk to other people. That last line. It hit like a bat to the ribs. Talk to other people. And there it was. I'd heard rumors. I'd seen the late-night texts. The new perfume. The way her phone flipped face down now whenever I walked into a room. But hearing it from her, calmly, like she was discussing weekend plans, was something else entirely. I looked at her. Just looked. Didn't flinch. Didn't yell. That silence between us. It wasn't passive. It wasn't empty. It was me choosing not to hand her the drama she was clearly prepared for. Because make no mistake, Patricia was bracing for a scene. She was expecting rage, confusion, maybe even pleading. I could see it in the way her eyes flicked to mine, then away. Waiting. Ready to spin it, shape it, control it. But I gave her nothing. Not out of weakness, but out of clarity. Something inside me, something I didn't know I still had, snapped back into place in that moment. Like a man remembering he has a spine. I nodded slowly. Just once. She blinked, thrown by how easy I made it seem. Do you have anything to say? I leaned forward just enough to speak, calm, steady, but with that steel edge I knew would land. No, I said. You've already said it for both of us. I watched her inhale like she was about to justify herself, about to launch into one of her patented rationalizations, but then she stopped. Because I didn't look hurt. I didn't look heartbroken. I just looked done. She sat up a little straighter, confusion creeping into her voice. This isn't about us, James. It's about me needing to grow. I smiled, but not the way I used to when I wanted to comfort her. This one was different. Just a quiet curve of the mouth. You're free to grow, I said. You've always been free. That's when it hit her. The way her jaw set. The way her eyes flicked to the wall like they were trying to find a foothold in a conversation slipping fast from her control. She thought I'd beg. She thought I'd argue. She thought she was leading. But what she hadn't prepared for, what really shook her, was the realization that I wasn't playing anymore. Because sometimes, silence isn't surrender. Sometimes, it's the first shot fired. I stood slowly, walked past her to the hallway, and paused only for a moment. Take all the space you need, Patricia, I said without turning around. But understand, once you open a door, you don't get to decide who walks through it, or who walks out. Then I left the room. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. It started small, subtle. One of those things you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. But Patricia was always paying attention, especially when it came to money. 2 days had passed since that night on the couch. Since she told me she needed space, needed to explore, needed to see what else might be out there. I hadn't said a word about it since. I hadn't sulked. I hadn't pushed. I just started making adjustments. I stopped paying the car loan. Then the insurance. Both were under my name. Patricia always said managing bills stressed her out, so I handled most of it. And I never minded. Not until now. Now. I didn't see the point in funding someone else's freedom while she figured out if I was still good enough to keep. I didn't tell her. That was the point. Because silence. It's louder than people think. That morning, I watched her from across the kitchen while I made eggs and she sipped coffee, scrolling through her phone. I knew the moment she saw it, her posture stiffened just slightly, one brow twitching upward. She didn't say anything. Not a word. But her fingers hovered just a little too long over the screen. And I could feel it, this flicker of unease she didn't quite know what to do with yet. It wasn't about the money. Not exactly. It was about what the money represented. Control. Stability. Assumptions. All of which had just quietly shifted. She tapped her screen a few more times, checking balances, probably trying to make sense of the missing payments. I didn't offer an explanation. Instead, I set my plate down, took a bite, and asked her how she slept. Like everything was perfectly normal. Fine, she said, distracted. Best sleep I've had in weeks, I replied, and I meant it. There was no venom in my tone, no pointed looks. I didn't need them. She nodded slowly, clearly still half lost in the bank app. A few seconds passed in silence. Then she locked her phone and slid it face down on the table. I kept eating. Calm. Steady. And I'll be honest, there was a quiet satisfaction in watching her try to pretend everything was still under control. Because that's the thing about people who need the upper hand, they get real nervous when they realize you've stopped playing. Later that afternoon, I got a notification. A login to our shared financial portal. A few password attempts. She was trying to dig deeper. Maybe she thought it was a glitch. Maybe she believed I'd just forgotten a payment. But what really got her? I didn't mention it. I didn't defend or explain or even pretend to notice. And that silence, it unsettled her more than if I'd screamed. By that evening, she'd started cleaning. Not the normal tidy-up kind. The nervous kind. Rearranging books that didn't need rearranging. Wiping counters that were already clean. I watched from the couch as she moved through the living room, her energy sharp and fidgety. You could almost feel the shift happening, like she was waking up to a new reality and couldn't quite decide whether it was a dream or a threat. And I said nothing. Because some statements don't need words. You just stop showing up for someone who's already walked out emotionally. You stop feeding the very foundation they thought was permanent. And you let them wonder. Let them feel the silence they created. It started around 7:48 a.m. My phone buzzed once. Patricia. I let it ring. Buzzed again, this time a FaceTime attempt. I ignored it. Swiped it away without even glancing at the screen. By the time I walked into the gym, she'd called 4 more times. Something had shifted in her. I could feel it, like the panic had finally started to crawl up the back of her neck. But I wasn't interested in managing her anxiety anymore. I slipped my phone into my bag, tightened my lifting gloves, and focused on the steel in front of me. Deadlifts. Heavy sets. Bar grip tight. Back straight. One clean pull after another. Each rep grounded me more than the last. Each clink of the weights hitting the floor felt like punctuation to a sentence I wasn't speaking out loud. You wanted space. Here it is. The gym was quiet that early in the morning, just a few regulars nodding their silent good mornings. No one asking questions. No one needing anything from me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Halfway through my set, I glanced over at my bag. The screen lit up again. Another call. Then another. This time, her sister. Then her best friend, Megan. I actually laughed under my breath. They were rallying now. Trying to form a net before I floated too far out of reach. I sat on the bench, wiping sweat from my neck, letting my muscles burn, letting that silence stretch longer and longer while my phone danced inside my bag. People always assume that rage is loud, that it's the sound of broken plates, slammed doors, raised voices. But the most terrifying thing you can give someone like Patricia is nothing. Not a fight. Not a reason. Just clean, steady distance. I knew her. Knew how her mind worked. The more I stayed quiet, the more she'd spiral. Because without my reaction, without my pain on display, she had no metric for control. No way to measure her power. That was the real story unfolding behind all those missed calls. She was losing grip on a version of me she never imagined would walk away without a dramatic scene. And I wasn't playing by her old script anymore. After an hour, I finished my workout, took a long pull from my water bottle, and finally checked the notifications. 10 missed calls. 4 voicemails. 2 texts from Megan, "Hey, everything okay?" She's really worried. Worried. Now she was worried. When she said she needed space, there was no tremble in her voice. Just that cool detachment. Like she was putting our marriage on hold so she could window shop emotional replacements. Now, suddenly she's unsure. It's funny how fast freedom starts to feel like abandonment when the person you expected to wait doesn't stick around. I walked past the treadmills, phone still in my hand, and headed for the locker room. No texts. No replies. No reactions. I wasn't trying to teach her a lesson. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was simply done offering myself up as someone she could choose or not choose, depending on the day. I was no longer on the shelf. And the truth is, once you realize your silence shakes the ground more than your words ever did, you stop raising your voice. You just keep walking. She showed up at my office on a Thursday. Didn't call. Didn't text ahead. Just appeared. The receptionist poked her head into my doorway with that uncertain expression that says, "I don't know what this is, but you probably should. She says she's your wife." I nodded slowly, setting down the paperwork I'd been reviewing. Let her in. When Patricia stepped through the door, it was like time slowed for half a second. Hair done. Subtle makeup, but enough to look like she'd tried. She wore the navy blouse I bought her 2 birthdays ago, the one she used to say made her feel powerful. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume before she even crossed the room. But none of that caught me off guard. It was the eyes. There was something searching in them. Like she'd come expecting to see something specific on my face, rage, confusion, even hurt, and didn't know what to do when it wasn't there. "Hey," she said softly, a little breathless. "I was in the area, thought I'd stop by." "In the area?" "Right. My office was 40 minutes from the house. Out of the way. Hard to reach even with traffic cooperating. So no, she wasn't just in the area. But I didn't call her out. I just motioned toward the seat across from my desk. She sat, smoothing the skirt over her knees, eyes flicking around the room like she was trying to anchor herself to something familiar. "You've been quiet," she said, testing the waters. "I've been working," I answered plainly, clicking my pen once and letting the silence stretch between us. There was a flicker in her expression, just enough for me to see the edge of her calm start to fray. I was worried. I gave her a small, polite smile. "About what?" She blinked. It threw her. I knew it would. Because up until now, she was the one who got to ask the questions. She was the one who got to check in or pull back. The one who created distance and then monitored how I filled it. But now she didn't recognize the version of me sitting across from her, straight-backed, focused, absolutely composed. "I've just been thinking a lot about us. I never meant to make you feel like, Patricia," I cut in, voice gentle but firm. "Is there something specific you need?" She stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. "I just thought maybe we could talk." I nodded slowly, folding my hands together on the desk. "All right. Let's talk." She smiled slightly, probably thinking this was her moment to pull me back in. But before she could speak again, I continued, "I understand you want space. I respect that. And I've been giving it to you." She opened her mouth, but I kept going. "I also understand that part of your space includes seeing other people. That was your decision. And I've made mine too. I'm prioritizing what gives me peace." Her smile faded. She looked down at her hands, then back up, searching my face, maybe for something familiar. Something warm. A crack. But I gave her nothing but calm clarity. The silence stretched again. She shifted in her seat, her voice suddenly thinner. "You're not angry?" I shook my head. "No, not even hurt." I leaned back slightly. I was. But that part already happened. She exhaled sharply, almost a scoff, almost a sigh. "You sound detached." I nodded. "I've learned that silence is a form of self-respect. Especially when someone asks you to wait while they decide your worth." Her mouth parted like she wanted to argue, but no words came. Because what do you say to a man who's no longer chasing? What do you do when the person you put on hold finally hangs up? She stood up slowly, smoothing her skirt again. "Well, I just wanted to check in." I smiled faintly. "Thanks for stopping by." And that was it. She left. No hug. No plea. Just the soft click of the door behind her, and the faint sound of control slipping through her fingers. That night, I got a text from Patricia. Just a picture. It was one of us, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We were at some winery upstate, standing close, cheeks sun-kissed and smiling like we didn't know what pain felt like yet. She'd captioned it with a single line, "Remember this day." I stared at it for a moment, long enough to let it stir something. But not long enough to let it root. Because nostalgia's tricky like that. It'll dress up a memory in warm colors and soft music, and before you know it, you're grieving something that never really existed the way you thought it did. Then came the second message. "Let's do dinner tomorrow. Just us. I'll cook." I didn't hesitate. Just sent a thumbs up. That's it. No, sounds good, no, what time. Just the emoji. That vague, neutral nod people use when they don't care enough to actually engage. And then I went back to what I was doing, fixing up an old shelf in the garage. Sanding down splinters with the radio low in the background, letting the evening pass without her. The next day, I came home at my usual time, but I didn't go inside right away. Sat in the car, engine ticking as it cooled, watching the kitchen window from the driveway. I could see her moving around inside, lighting candles, setting 2 plates, folding napkins. She even had that old playlist on, the one we used to cook to on Friday nights when life felt simple. She was setting the stage, thinking this was the chapter where I softened. Where I came inside, smiled like an old lover, and said something like, "I've missed this." But I didn't move. Not right away. I waited until I saw her glance toward the window. Waiting. Then I pulled out of the driveway and drove off. No explanation. No fight. Just gone. The next morning, I noticed she didn't speak much. No mention of the dinner, no questions about why I didn't show. But the silence was different now. Before, it was sharp, used like a weapon between us. Now, it was hollow. Echoing. And I could tell, she was starting to feel the quiet in a way she hadn't before. Because it wasn't a pause anymore. It was absence. You could see it in how carefully she placed her coffee mug down, in how long she lingered by the front door before heading to work, in the way she opened her mouth a few times like she might say something, then didn't. She was hoping I'd offer her a line, hoping I'd make this easier to reverse. But I was done softening the blow of her decisions. The reality was sinking in. This wasn't some temporary retreat where she got to go explore her options while I stayed in orbit, ready for a return. She wasn't choosing me, and I'd stopped waiting for her to. The only thing I offered her now was honesty. And silence is honest. It says, "I heard you the first time. I believed you. And I'm adjusting accordingly." It showed up on my feed the next morning. I wasn't looking for it. I don't scroll like that anymore. But there it was, right near the top. Patricia's latest post. A selfie, taken somewhere downtown. Dressed up, golden hour lighting, that same smirk she used to save for special occasions. And next to her, some guy. Taller than me. Button-down shirt open just enough to show off a gym routine. Hand lightly resting on the small of her back like he belonged there. The caption was short. Effortless. Good nights and better company. No tags. But no hiding, either. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't private. It was intentional. She wanted me to see it. That much was clear. I stared at it for maybe 3 seconds, then put my phone face down and went back to my coffee. No reaction. No call. No text. Not even a tap on the heart icon. Because what do you do when someone who said they needed a space starts broadcasting proof that they're filling it? You let them. Let them play it out. Let them post and pose and pretend they're floating. But freedom's expensive. And some people don't check the fine print. Later that afternoon, I got a call. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Is this James Harrison? Yes. This is Raphael with Horizon Auto Finance. We just wanted to confirm that the voluntary surrender of the 2020 Lexus UX was still scheduled for this morning. Our driver said the vehicle wasn't present at the address. I paused. Looked at my watch. Then smiled. Give it another hour, I said. It'll be there. I hung up. See, that was the part Patricia had never thought about. The car, the one she'd used for years, the one with the leather seats and the backup camera and the dealership plates. It was under my name. Both the loan and the insurance. She liked to call it her ride, but legally, it was mine. And last week, after her "I need space" speech, I'd called the bank and made a quiet decision. If she was going to start showing off new passengers, she could find new transportation too. I waited. Watched the hours pass. Around noon, I got another text. This one from her. Where's my car? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because by then, the tow truck had already come and gone. She must have walked out, keys in hand, heels clicking, ready for another little moment of curated independence, only to find the driveway empty. The silence on her end after that. Louder than any voicemail. And I knew exactly what she was feeling. It wasn't about the car. Not really. It was about the grip. The grip she thought she still had. Because she'd been so focused on the optics, on making it look like she was moving on first, that she forgot where her foundation came from. She thought control was posting faster, smiling wider, getting out there first. But I'd never been racing her. I was just quietly reclaiming what was mine. And sometimes, that includes a title and registration. I didn't post it. Wasn't even thinking about social media that night. I was just out, nothing more, nothing less. Couple of co-workers had invited me to grab drinks after we wrapped a late project. I almost said no, but something told me to go. So I did. It wasn't a date. Not even close. But at some point between the second round and a dumb joke about office coffee, someone at the table took a short video, one of those candid, shaky clips where everyone's mid-laugh, shoulders leaning in, drinks raised just slightly. It ended up on someone's story. Tagged me in it. I didn't even notice until the next morning. By then, it had already made its way to Patricia. I know that because of how she looked at me. She didn't say a word. Just watched me across the kitchen table like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit together anymore. I was scrolling through emails, sipping my coffee. Calm. Focused. The usual. She was quiet. Still in her robe, hair slightly damp, cereal soggy in the bowl she hadn't touched. And I could feel it. The tension in her silence wasn't the kind that leads to a fight. It was the kind that comes from seeing something you didn't expect, and not knowing how to react without showing your hand. Eventually, she tried. Who was that girl? I didn't look up. What girl? In the story. The one you were laughing with. I set my phone down gently and met her eyes. A coworker. Seemed like you were getting along. I shrugged. We get along. She nodded. Slow. Thoughtful. And for a moment, I could see it, the exact emotion she'd been hoping to plant in me with that flirty post and the mystery guy on her Instagram. Jealousy. But it hadn't landed. Not because I was playing a game better than her, but because I wasn't playing anymore. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. You didn't say you were going out last night. I smiled faintly. Didn't realize I needed to. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Like she had a dozen arguments queued up, but none of them made sense in this new version of us. She looked down at her bowl, then finally spoke, voice low. You've changed. I didn't answer right away. Just sat with that sentence for a moment. Because yeah, I had changed. Not dramatically. Not overnight. Just enough to stop waiting for someone to value me after they tested my limits. I'm just clearer now, I said finally. About what I'm willing to accept. And what I'm not. She didn't speak again. Didn't finish her cereal either. Just got up quietly, left the kitchen, and closed the bedroom door behind her. And I sat there a few minutes longer, letting the silence settle. Because in that quiet, something finally clicked. She had been trying to create a reaction. To control the story. But the moment she saw my ease, the unbothered smile, the natural laugh with someone who expected nothing from me, it unraveled everything she'd tried to hold together with curated distance and half-truths. Control doesn't live in who posts first. It lives in who no longer needs to prove anything at all. She didn't knock. Didn't ask if I had time to talk. Just came into the living room while I was folding laundry, her voice already shaking with something between frustration and fear. We need to talk. I kept folding. Slow, deliberate. One of my shirts. A pair of socks. I could feel her watching me, waiting for me to pause, waiting for a crack. I didn't give her one. I'm listening, I said calmly. She stepped closer. Her arms were crossed, but her posture was loose, unsure. The usual sharp edge she carried when she wanted a fight wasn't there. Instead, there was this confused, wounded energy I hadn't seen from her in a long time. I don't know what's going on with you, she started. You've barely spoken to me in days. You come and go, you don't answer texts, you're like a ghost in this house. I looked up at her and gave a soft nod, like I was acknowledging a fair observation. That's true. She blinked, thrown off. That's it. That's all you're going to say. I placed the last folded shirt on the stack and sat down on the couch. Calm, level. Not defensive. I'm giving you what you asked for. She stared at me. I didn't ask you to disappear. No, I said. You asked for space. You told me you needed time to figure out what you wanted. You said you wanted to explore other connections. And I agreed. Her jaw clenched. That doesn't mean you just stop caring. I tilted my head slightly, voice still steady. It doesn't mean I keep waiting, either. The silence that followed was thicker than anything she'd brought with her. I could see it in her face, she didn't expect this version of me. Detached. Grounded. Not angry, not cruel, just settled. You think I don't see what you're doing, she said suddenly, louder now. Ignoring my calls, posting like everything's fine. I didn't post anything, I said. She faltered. Well, your friends did. I raised an eyebrow. So now it's a problem that I smiled in public. That one landed. She looked down at the rug, biting her lip, then looked up again. Her voice dropped, lower, almost a whisper. I didn't think you'd stop trying. And there it was. The truth. Not about me, but about her. She never thought I'd really let go. She'd expected me to orbit her. To be patient, hurt, available, waiting in quiet agony while she figured out if I was still the best deal on the table. But I wasn't interested in being a backup plan anymore. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, voice low and clear. You told me you were choosing freedom. I didn't fight you. I just, finally agreed with you. Her breath caught. Her shoulders dropped, just a little. I didn't think it'd feel like this, she said quietly. I stood, not out of anger, but finality. Neither did I. She didn't stop me as I walked past. Didn't follow. Didn't call my name. And I didn't turn back. Because some truths don't need to be repeated. They just need to be lived. I heard her before I saw her. The soft sounds, barely their sobs, the kind you only let out when you think no one's listening. She was in the bedroom. Door half shut. Lights off except for the dim glow from the hallway bleeding through the crack. It was late. Quiet. That heavy kind of quiet that settles over a house like dust, soft, but suffocating. I stood there in the hallway for a few seconds. Not frozen. Not conflicted. Just, still. There was a time when those sounds would have pulled me in without hesitation. A time I would have rushed to the door, held her, whispered that we'd be okay, even if I wasn't sure we would be. But that night, I didn't go in. I walked past the door, slow and silent, and headed straight for the living room. Grabbed the extra pillow off the armchair. Unfolded the throw blanket from the basket beside the couch. Laid everything down with the kind of quiet that says, this is no longer a shared space. 15 minutes passed before I heard the door open. Her steps were soft, hesitant. She stopped a few feet from the couch. I didn't look up. You're not coming to bed, she asked, voice brittle. I adjusted the pillow behind my head. No, just for tonight. I exhaled slowly. Probably not. Silence. Then she sat on the edge of the coffee table, just close enough for her presence to feel heavy in the room. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. I nodded. Most people don't. Her voice cracked a little. I thought I needed to figure myself out. I didn't know you'd pull away like this. I finally looked at her. Eyes red. Shoulders curved inward like she was trying to make herself small again. Like she wanted to fit back into something that used to feel familiar. You asked me to stand still while you searched for something better, I said gently. Now you're upset that I started walking. Her eyes filled again, but she didn't speak. Because what was there to say? She gambled on my patience. On my softness. On the belief that I'd always be within reach. But grief has a way of shaping a man. And quiet, it sharpens his decisions. I'm not angry, I told her. But I'm not the same, either. She nodded slowly. I can tell. I laid back, pulled the blanket over me. You should get some rest, I said. She sat there for a moment longer, maybe hoping I'd change my mind. But I didn't. Eventually, she got up. Walked down the hall. Closed the bedroom door behind her. And I stayed right there on the couch. Not as a punishment. Not to prove a point. Just to honor where I was now, a place that didn't include pretending. The apartment smelled like rosemary and garlic when I got home. The lights were dimmed, low and warm. Music played from the speaker in the corner, one of our old playlists. The kind she used to put on when we danced barefoot in the kitchen, back when touch didn't feel like a transaction. I paused just inside the doorway. Took it all in. The table was set. Cloth napkins. The good plates. Candles lit. Patricia stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot with practiced ease. She was wearing the dress I once told her made her look like trouble in the best way. Hair down. Light makeup. That old perfume I hadn't smelled in months. It was her last card. The nostalgic night. The come-home gesture wrapped in all the aesthetics of our better days. She looked up as I walked in. Smiled gently. Hey. I nodded. Hey. I made dinner. I can see that. She hesitated, then motioned to the table. You hungry? I thought about saying no. Thought about turning around, heading back out, maybe finding something easier than this. But I didn't. Instead, I walked over, pulled out the chair, and sat down. She brought over 2 plates, chicken, roasted vegetables, that rice with lemon and dill I used to ask for on my birthday. She sat across from me, trying not to look nervous. But I could see the way her fingers trembled when she reached for her glass. We ate mostly in silence. I thanked her for the meal. Told her it was good. And it was. She'd always known how to cook. But the food felt distant. Like it was meant for someone I used to be. She tried small talk. Asked about work. Mentioned a funny thing her coworker said. Laughed too hard at her own story, like she was trying to fill the space that used to belong to comfort. I listened. I nodded. But I didn't meet her halfway. Because something had changed that couldn't be undone with seasoning and soft music. Halfway through the meal, she leaned forward, her voice quieter. I know I messed things up. I looked at her. She swallowed hard. I was scared. Of feeling stuck. Of turning into someone who settled too soon. I thought I needed to try something different to appreciate what I had. I nodded slowly. And now. She blinked, eyes glassy. Now I see what I was doing. I see what I could lose. There it was. The truth, late, but honest. And if I had still been in the place I was a few weeks ago, that might have broken me open. I might have reached across the table, taken her hand, and started building bridges. But I was somewhere else now. I set my fork down gently, wiped my mouth with the napkin, and looked at her, really looked at her. You're not the person I built this life with, I said quietly. She flinched. And I don't think I am, either. Not anymore. Her lip trembled. She tried to speak, but I kept going. I don't hate you. I'm not bitter. I see it now. All of it. The patterns. The power games. The conditional love. And how long I accepted it because I thought it was just part of being in a long relationship. I stood slowly, pushed my chair back, and looked down at the table. This was a beautiful effort. Really. But a beautiful effort doesn't undo the truth. She stood, too, reaching out instinctively. Please don't do this. I didn't step back. But I didn't step forward either. I'm not doing anything to you, Patricia. I'm finally doing something for me. She stood frozen, arms hanging uselessly by her sides. I walked to the kitchen, rinsed my plate, and set it gently in the sink. No anger. No theatrics. Just quiet truth. Then I turned back toward her one last time. I appreciate the dinner. I really do. But I can't sit in a memory and call it a future. And with that, I walked out of the room. Left her standing there between the flickering candles and the music that no longer felt like ours. The zipper slid closed without hesitation. Duffel bag packed. Not rushed, not messy, just enough for a few weeks. The essentials. I wasn't leaving in anger, so I didn't take more than I needed. This wasn't revenge. This was release. Patricia stood by the wall near the hallway, arms folded like she was holding herself together. She hadn't said a word since dinner. Not when I walked out of the kitchen. Not when I disappeared into the bedroom. Not when I started folding shirts and rolling up socks. And now, here we were. I stepped into the living room, bag slung over my shoulder. I didn't need to look around. I knew where everything was. The furniture we picked together. The photo frames that hadn't been updated in years. The couch that saw more silence than conversation these days. She took a half step forward when she saw me ready to go. James. I stopped. Waited. She took a breath like she was bracing for a final chance. You don't have to go tonight. I looked at her. Calm. Steady. I know. Her face crumpled just slightly at the edges, like she wasn't expecting that answer. Like a small part of her had convinced herself I was still bluffing. Still hoping for the old me, the one who would fight, stay, compromise. She tried again, softer this time. We can talk more. We don't have to decide anything right now. I gave her a long look. Not cold. Not sharp. Just, final. We've already decided, Patricia. We just did it in different ways. Tears welled up in her eyes. But I still love you. I nodded. I believe that. Her lips parted like she didn't know what to say next. Because love had always been her reset button. The thing she reached for when everything else fell apart. But sometimes love isn't the question. Sometimes it's the excuse. I stepped toward the door. Where will you go? She asked, her voice breaking. Somewhere quiet. The lock clicked as I turned it. She rushed forward a step. James, please, can we just stop for a second? I turned the handle, pushed the door open. The night air spilled in, cool, still, full of a different kind of silence. I looked back at her one last time. She stood in the same place, arms limp now at her sides, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. And for the first time, she looked small. Not physically. Not weak. Just, unguarded. Unsure. Like she had finally realized this wasn't about pride or punishment. It was about peace. I held her gaze for a beat longer, then said what I'd been carrying for weeks. You told me you needed to find yourself. I'm giving you the space to do that. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come in time. Because I stepped through the door. And closed it gently behind me. No slam. No final jab. Just the quiet end of a chapter that had already written its last line. For a few seconds, I stood there in the hallway, listening. And then I heard it. Not a call. Not a wait. Just a sound from deep inside, the kind of sound someone makes when they finally realize they've lost something they thought would always be there. A muffled scream into the quiet. Raw. Wordless. Real. I didn't go back. I walked down the stairs, bag over my shoulder, each step feeling lighter than the last. And as the city night swallowed me whole, one thought settled into place more clearly than ever before. She was never ready for me to choose myself. But I was. Finally. We all hit that point, don't we? That quiet edge where we either keep waiting, or we start walking. So I'll ask you, have you ever stayed somewhere too long, just because someone expected you to? Ever been afraid to choose yourself? Let me know in the comments. Because sometimes, the hardest goodbye, is the one where no one slams the door. It just clicks. Soft. Final. And free.